I'm gonna be completely honest. This isn't a typical video that I usually make. But like everyone says, there's a first time for everything. So without further ado, welcome to my review of the Potensic Atom 2. Just to put things into perspective, I'm by no means a professional drone pilot. I mean, I reviewed 2 drones about 7 or 8 years ago, and the only time I flew anything since was that one $16 AliExpress joke of a drone in an unboxing video. I hit the neighbor's window. That $16 could have been spent on V-Bucks. What we've got here today is the Atom 2 from Potensic. This is the Fly More combo version, which basically means you get a custom carry bag for the drone and all of its accessories, extra propellers, 3 batteries instead of 1, and a fast charging hub. So this combo actually costs $120 more than the standard kit. But if you're planning on flying multiple times per day or even longer sessions, then the extra batteries will pay for themselves, and I'll talk more about that later. So with the battery installed, the Atom 2 weighs just under 250 grams, keeping you clear of FAA registration in many regions. As always though, you should check your local regulations before you fly though, as some countries and regions differ on drone weight and camera restrictions. So this is actually Potensic's 4th Atom model. I haven't tested the original Atom, so I have nothing really to compare it against, but from my research, the biggest upgrades are from the actual camera and the controller. The controller feels great in the hand. It's kind of like holding a chunkier and sturdier PS5 controller. I mean, it's made out of plastic, but it's quite sturdy, with a sliding phone clamp that fits pretty average sized phones. Up to 6.7 inches in length, which, let me tell you ladies, that is large enough. So I had no trouble slotting in my iPhone 16 Pro Max here. There's even this pretty cool cable management slot over here on the side to keep the cable from being crushed by the clamp. You get 2 such cables in the box, one USB-C and one Lightning, so you can pretty much use any modern phone, including older iPhones. The controller has its own built-in rechargeable battery, which runs about 4 hours on a full charge per USB-C. And on the back here, you'll find a dedicated mode to switch between video, photo, and recording. We also got 2 scroll wheels to adjust the gimbal tilt and digital zoom, and then 2 programmable C1 and C2 buttons. The app actually allows you to remap these buttons, but I just left them on the default. I didn't use the shortcuts during my test anyway, as I use the app 90% of the time for any settings changes. But just so you are aware, the C1 button adjusts the angle of the camera. Pressing it once will aim the camera down directly, and then pressing it again will reset it to the forward location. I do have to say that the triggers do feel a bit finicky at the edges, and I'm not a huge fan of them. I would recommend pressing near the center of the buttons just so you can get a reliable click. But that's enough talk, let's get this in the air. So taking off is actually super easy. Just press and hold around the middle of the screen until the slider appears, then slide it and the drone launches. Thanks to the upgraded controller, we now get a 1080p 30fps live feed and a rated 10 kilometers of range. I unfortunately won't be able to test that here, as there are plenty of restricted zones around me. The camera is quite impressive for the price. It sports a 1/2-inch CMOS sensor that can shoot up to 4K 30fps HDR videos, as well as 48 megapixel photos in 8K. The lens has an f1.8 aperture, and it's supposed to have improved low-light performance from its predecessor, so we'll check that out later when the sun sets. There is just one little caveat, and it's that the 8K photos are only going to be in JPEG format. If you want them in RAW, you'll have to lower the resolution down to 4K. In my opinion, that's completely fine, and you don't lose out too much on quality. Here's a side-by-side of the same view in 8K and 4K RAW. The biggest difference is that you have more freedom in terms of color grading and editing the RAW photo. Additionally, there's the option to take panoramic and wide-angle photos. You can essentially choose it to be either vertical, horizontal, or wide angle, and the drone will automatically take multiple photos and piece them together to form one panoramic shot, which was pretty cool. If you really wanted to, you can tweak the white balance, ISO, and shutter speed, but auto does a solid job on its own, so I left it untouched for the sake of the video. Now for recording videos, the Atom 2 tops out at 4K 30fps. However, you can lower the resolution to gain access to more aspect ratios and FPS options. There's a 2.7K up to 30 FPS and 1080p up to 60 FPS. Additionally, there's a dedicated slow mode option at 1080p for up to 5 times slowdown. It basically records at 120 FPS and plays it back at 24, allowing you to create some really dramatic B-roll. I would say this is in the top 3 of my favorite features so far. On the topic of aspect ratios, if you're into short form content or social media, there's a vertical shooting mode that lets you record in 9:16. Now this mode is only available in 1080p and 2.7K resolutions, and sadly it only crops the frame instead of physically rotating the gimbal by 90 degrees. The quality is still good for what it is, but I'd much rather have the gimbal rotated on its side so we can take advantage of the full 4K resolution. As I mentioned before, there is a zoom function controlled by the wheel on the right of the controller. However, I wouldn't recommend recording or shooting photos while zoomed in. It's only a digital zoom, so you sacrifice a lot of quality and you'll only get usable results if you're just scouting an area before flying toward it. In 4K, you can zoom up to 2 times, and in 1080p, up to 4 times. But in both cases, it just becomes hopelessly pixelated. Now, the AI features are what really sell this drone, in my opinion. Of course, there's AI tracking with the follow, parallel, and spotlight modes, but AI Quickshots is where it's at. There are 6 intelligent flight modes. Pull away, which you saw earlier in the intro. Rocket, which rises straight up above your head for a bird's eye view. Circle, that does a 360-degree orbit. And then there's spiral and boomerang, which are variations of the circle with different trajectories. And lastly, there is dolly zoom, which is an interesting one. In this mode, the drone flies away from its target while zooming in at the same time, creating this kind of vertigo effect that warps and enlarges the background. I think this adds a really cool dynamic shot to your videos, however, it's not always accurate. Most of my tests with the dolly zoom had the drone going sideways instead of a straight line, making the footage look off. There was only one time where I finally got it to go backwards in a straight line, so it's a bit of a hit or miss. When it works, it's freaking awesome, but when it doesn't, it's a little frustrating. My favorite mode, however, is the follow mode. You get this really dope bird's eye view while the drone follows you around. But one thing I noticed is that it doesn't do a great job following you on tight turns. So if you're making a 90-degree turn on the street and there's a building in the way, the drone will lose you. So it's something to keep in mind. Also, if you go faster than the drone, it will stop following you. So it's best to keep the drone in sport mode, that way it's able to keep up with you if you're driving a vehicle. The drone already comes with a micro SD card installed in the back here, so you can just take it out and transfer the files directly to your PC. However, there is also an option to download everything straight to your smartphone with the Smart Transfer feature in the Potensic Eve app. This way, you won't even need to remove the micro SD card at all. Depending on your piloting style, there are 3 different speed settings. There is video mode, which is the slowest of the bunch. This prioritizes stability and smooth movements to minimize any jerky motions. That's the speed I use for all the panning cinematic shots. And then we got normal mode, which is a little faster, but with still a decent stability. And then there is sport mode. This allows the drone to reach speeds of up to 16 meters a second, which is around 35 miles per hour. Beginner mode is on by default when you first activate the drone, and you must disable it in the app to access normal and sport mode. Kudos to Potensic for the beginner mode feature. If you're just starting out with the drone or if you've never flown a drone before, personally I would recommend keeping it on beginner mode until you get the hang of it, and then you can disable it and fly it on normal. In sport mode, however, the controls become very responsive and you can lose control very easily. Since the drone lacks any obstacle detection too, your little new friend might hit the bucket a lot quicker than you think. If you really want to venture into sport mode, there's the option to adjust stick sensitivity in the app for smoother controls. Now in terms of battery life, in my tests, I averaged about 22 minutes per battery, which is below the advertised 32 minutes. But in all fairness, I was flying aggressively and tweaking settings constantly. With more conservative flying, you'll get much more flight time out of them. But that's where the extra batteries shine. Having 2 in reserve and swapping them in seconds beats waiting around for them to recharge any day. Also, a single battery is $55 on Potensic's website, so getting the Fly More combo is already worth it just for the 2 extra batteries and the fast charging hub. Okay, one last thing to test is night mode, and lucky for me, the sun has already set. Here's the raw footage in normal mode. As you can see, when the drone is facing the sunset, everything else gets extremely dark to a point where you can't see any of the details. But if we face away from the sunset, the color of the sky is more clear and you can actually see the details of the buildings much better. So if you're planning on shooting at night, it's best to face away from the sunset so you get the best footage. Here's another example overlooking the San Fernando Valley at night. Not bad, right? I mean, it's not the best low light footage from a drone, but here is what it looks like enabling night mode. This setting basically boosts the ISO up to 25,600 to capture as much light as possible. It's not too bad, but I would definitely recommend using external lighting for a clear image or do a little bit of color grading in post-production. All in all, I would say the Atom 2 is the perfect beginner drone in the compact budget drone market. It's not often you see 4K HDR video, 8K stills, and awesome AI features in a sub $360 drone. That's assuming you don't go for the Fly More combo, which I highly recommend for the extra batteries, hub, and carrying bag. Obstacle detection would have been nice to see for me personally, especially when you're doing AI quick shots. I mean, you do run the risk of collision if you don't check your surroundings properly before activating them. But yeah, if you guys are in the market for a travel-friendly 4K drone with some pretty cool AI features, then you'll find a link to the Atom 2 down below in the description section. Also, as a side note, the Atom 2 is now available at Costco, so feel free to check out the second link to learn more about their current offer. But yeah, let me know in the comment section if you guys enjoyed the video and if you want to see more drone videos on the channel. I personally had a lot of fun shooting this, so thanks for watching and I'll see you in the next one.